President Obama says it's not perfect, but promises his beleaguered health care reform program is not going away. This is Special Report. Good evening, I'm Brett Baer. President Obama took another shot this afternoon at another relaunch of his massively troubled health care reform initiative. And he says he'll keep at it as long as it takes. We have Fox team coverage tonight. Shannon Bream has another trip to federal court for Obamacare. Jim Angle with the big December countdown that has more to do with health insurance than the holidays. But we begin with Chief White House correspondent Ed Henry and a president who is not backing down. Good evening, Ed.
That's right. Good evening, Brett. The president today said he's learned not to make any more of what he called wild promises about the website. Nonetheless, he went on offense because his aides tell me they now finally believe the tide is starting to turn in their favor.
The bottom line is this law is working and will work into the future.
A defiant President Obama tried to change the narrative on his botched rollout, claiming healthcare.gov is turning the corner and benefits are kicking in, as he unveiled yet another sales pitch that Republicans are still just not buying.
While the White House wants to claim that healthcare.gov is now working, we know that Obamacare is still plagued with problems, and every American deserves relief from it.
Relief is also needed for congressional Democrats, who are nervously watching their poll numbers sink ahead of 2014, while the president's own approval ratings plummet. So he launched a new political campaign to call Republicans out for not offering an alternative to a law that he vowed will not be torn down.
You got good ideas? Bring them to me. Let's go. But we're not repealing it as long as I'm president. I want everybody to be clear about that.
And with his embattled Health and Human Services Secretary Kathleen Sebelius and Senior Advisor Valerie Jarrett looking on, the president dug in, declaring this is his top second-term priority.
If I've got to fight another 3 years to make sure this law works, then that's what I'll do. That's what we'll do. There are millions more who stand to be helped. And we've got to make sure they know that. And, you know, I've said very clearly that our poor execution in the first couple months on the website clouded the fact that there are a whole bunch of people who stand to benefit.
Another attempt by the president to assert the law itself is not the problem. And if only his team had better communicated how good it is and done a better job on the web, all would be fine. Even though aides to Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell quickly noted, the president has launched at least a dozen other major public relations blitzes on health care over the past 3 years.
Do you feel like he's just sort of stuck in the same place and that you've made this pitch before and people just are still not buying it?
Really, because the law passed, the president won re-election, the Supreme Court upheld it, and 1 million people showed up on the website yesterday. Right. And guess what? 380,000 showed up before noon today.
Republicans insist the website issues are just the tip of the iceberg.
This bill is fundamentally flawed. It's causing people to lose the doctor of their choice, causing them to lose their health plan. And if that isn't enough, they're having to pay much higher prices at the same time.
Now, Boehner's office noting tonight that there was not a lot of air cover for the president today from congressional Democrats, didn't have a lot of news conferences or anything like that, perhaps nervous about the politics of touting this health care law. But a White House official just told me it's only the first day of a 3-week rollout, and they believe they'll have the support in the end. Brett?
Ed, any sense how much this is all going to cost the taxpayer?
Well, there's basically officials confirming tonight that they're looking at ways to help maybe provide some money to insurance companies to delay those cancellation notices for a year, as the president promised a few weeks ago. There are Republican critics saying this could be a bailout. What the White House is telling me tonight is they hope that there'll be enough young, healthy people to sign up and sort of balance the risk pool so there won't be a lot of risk to taxpayers. But if those young, healthy people don't sign up, and as you know, it's still an open question, that could expose taxpayers. No doubt about it, Brett.
Ed Henry live on the North Lawn. Ed, thanks. Many of you have obviously circled December 25th on your calendar for obvious reasons, but tonight Chief National Correspondent Jim Angle tells us there's another date that could be even more important to you and your family if you're on the hunt for health insurance.
The Christmas rush this year won't just be for items to go under the tree. December 23rd is also the new deadline to get an insurance policy to take effect on January 1st.
I think it's fair to say that you're going to have to see hundreds of thousands of people enroll pretty much every day between now and the 23rd in order to get to the goal.
But they still have a massive problem of millions of people that supposedly need coverage and a system that really isn't built well enough to handle that.
The goal is to sign up 7 million for private insurance and 9 million for Medicaid by the end of March. All that on top of some 5 million policies that were canceled because they didn't meet the requirements of Obamacare, which represent far more than 5 million people.
Most policies cover multiple people, say 2 spouses and some children. It could be as many as 10 or 12 or 14 million people have lost their coverage.
The rollout has been very rocky, and it's caused, major disruptions. And at this point, I think the question is, how do you operate a salvage operation that will get you back on track?
Mendelson says so far the total enrollment's about 150,000 at both the state and federal levels, but more than half that, 80,000, came from just California, meaning the federal marketplaces are way behind.
You have to run through the system well over 200,000 people per day for those 23 days in December. So is the website really capable of handling 200,000 signups just to cover the individual cancellations?
But the pre-Christmas crush isn't the only problem. The federal government hasn't built the software to accurately tell insurance companies who's actually enrolled. One report says up to 1/3 of the enrollment since October 1st have errors, so people may think they have coverage when they do not.
One problem is that the insurance companies may not know that somebody's enrolled when they think they're enrolled because the sign-up process was so screwed up.
The website was supposed to be the entry point for enrolling and automating the enrollment and paying of insurance plans. It is nowhere near ready to do that.
In fact, officials say the software to make that work correctly hasn't even been built yet. Brett?
Jim, thanks. One group definitely profiting from the Obamacare mess: lawyers. The health plan is once again being dragged into court. Correspondent Shannon Bream is here with that story. Good evening, Shannon. Tell us about this latest challenge.
Well, today in federal court here in Washington, this was a lawsuit about the text of an IRS regulation that is stemming from the overall health care law. The plaintiffs in this case say the text of the law says that those subsidies that go out to help people buy insurance, they're only supposed to be given out in states that have set up their own state exchanges and not into the states where the federal government is the one operating the exchange. The IRS says not so. According to the agency's interpretation, those subsidies go to applicants in every state. That is a huge distinction. It's very important because where the subsidies are awarded, that triggers massive, costly mandates for the employers they wouldn't have otherwise, and that's why they're suing. They say the costs will force them to cut employee hours, stop hiring, maybe even go out of business. They say this is just another example of overreach by the federal government. They say it primarily stems from the executive branch because they believe the IRS is acting on orders from the White House.
And that issue of executive overreach got a lot of attention on Capitol Hill today.
Yeah, there was a very heated hearing in the House today, and it was about presidential power, how far it goes. Generally and more specifically, they did talk about President Obama and said, there are times he doesn't enforce laws that he doesn't think are proper, like immigration laws, but that he's also made significant changes to his own health care law simply by making a statement or something that's posted in a White House blog. George Washington University law professor Jonathan Turley today testified, and he said no matter who the president is, that actually sets a very dangerous precedent. Here's what he said.
The center of gravity is shifting, and that makes it unstable. And within that system, you have the rise of an Uber presidency. There could be no greater danger for individual liberty.
He said in his opinion that the founders would be very unhappy and surprised by what's happening now. But Democrats on the committee said, hey, presidents from both parties have done this, and as long as we have gridlock on Capitol Hill, President Obama is likely to continue doing it.
Okay, Shannon, thank you. An economic life preserver for a city could be a financial disaster for many people who gave much of their lives to that city. Correspondent Mike Tobin reports tonight on the granting of bankruptcy protection for Detroit.
The ruling is unwelcome to Detroit city employees as their pensions now hang in the balance, and Detroit digs itself out from $18 billion in debt.
This is a moral issue that we're dealing with. It is wrong for you to take somebody's pension that have given their life, that have sacrificed 30 years.
The trouble began with the exodus that followed automotive jobs. With a smaller tax base, city leaders did not reduce the budget. Under pressure from labor unions, they never reduced things like health benefits or bonuses. When the budget was in the red, they borrowed. Judge Stephen Rhodes wondered out loud why this hadn't happened sooner as he made the historic ruling that Detroit is eligible for Chapter 9 bankruptcy. Now, pensions for more than 23,000 firefighters, police, and other municipal employees are facing the potential of dramatic reductions.
We're trying to be very thoughtful, measured, and humane about what we have to do. What I can tell them is that the reality is there's not enough money to address the situation no matter what we do.
The American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees immediately filed a notification of appeal, noting that there is no insurance to act as a backstop for city pensioners. They just lose money. Also noting that Judge Rhodes determined the city did not bargain with pension representatives in good faith, but there was no practical way to do so.
We are disappointed with the fact that the judge found that, in effect, they didn't have to. We think that's bad for Detroit, and we think that sets a bad precedent for other cities.
The emergency manager says this is a new beginning, a chance to work with city employees and move forward. Representatives of the pensioners say this is the start of the fight.
The fight isn't over here. The mere fact that the city is eligible certainly does not indicate that the pension board or the retirees are going to allow any diminishment or impairment that is presented by the city. Perhaps the fight has now just begun.
The cuts and changes are not immediate. Action really starts when the emergency manager, Kevin Orr, presents what is called the Plan for Adjustment. That gets the ball rolling. It's expected before the end of the year. Brett?
Mike Tobin live in Detroit tonight. Mike, thanks. More on this with the panel. A second straight down day on Wall Street. The Dow lost 94. The S&P 500 fell 6. The NASDAQ was off 8. Up next, what could be law enforcement's worst nightmare. And you can make it at home. But first, what some of our Fox affiliates across the country are covering tonight. Fox 5 in New York with the latest on Sunday's deadly train derailment. A union official says the engineer caught himself nodding off at the controls prior to the crash. Fox 13 in Tacoma on Seattle Seahawks fans rocking their stadium so hard during last night's game, it registered as an earthquake. And this is a live look at our Denver affiliate, KDVR. The big story there tonight, preparations for what could be the coldest air in years. Temperatures below zero are forecast Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday in Denver, Colorado, along with about a foot of snow. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back.